Prime Minister, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Leigh.
You're shifting JobSeeker and JobKeeper to lower amounts. Why would you pull any money out of the economy during what will be one of the worst recessions in a century?
Well, it's important to note that the existing payments, as they've been running now for some months, will run out till the end of September. At that point, it'll move to the next phase. Now, I think Australians understand that running, say, JobKeeper at $11 billion a month is not something that's sustainable. These are much elevated payments. The nature of how things are unfolding is changing, and quite a number of businesses now are coming up above that 30% downturn threshold. And so it is always the plan to stage us out of this, to make sure that we could be tapering off as things improve, and it's our intention to ensure that things do improve. But the nature of these payments and the way they're designed is they flow towards where the need is greatest. They're an automatic stabiliser, if you like, and that's what we've been doing now for many months, putting that automatic shock absorber in to cushion that blow, as I said some months ago.
You mentioned it goes to where it's needed the most. Universities don't qualify for JobKeeper, and universities are putting off thousands of workers across the country. Why doesn't the government put the same value on a job in a university as a job in a cafe or a shop?
Well, we do. I mean, the university sector is the only sector that receives the single largest almost support through our guarantee of student placements. On top of that, they're organisations with very large reserves in the billions. Their CEOs are paid multi-million-dollar salaries. They're not unlike large corporates. And for large corporates to qualify for this program, they've had to have a 50% downturn in revenue. So we're applying the same tests, Leigh.
Universities are also one of Australia's biggest export industries. They contribute innumerable direct and indirect benefits to the economy. They've taken a big hit because of the inability to have foreign students travelling here. Surely that's a case that they do deserve JobKeeper. They hire a lot of Australians.
Well, the test is whether they've had a 50% fall in revenue. That's what's applied to other large organisations. I mean, universities, I think we should remember, these are very large organisations with billion-dollar reserves, and they've got multi-million-dollar CEOs, and they're making decisions about how they're running their own organisations, just like many large businesses are going through this. Now, JobKeeper only applies to those large businesses where they've had a 50% fall in their turnover, and the reason for that is because they're expected to draw on their reserves. So those private companies are doing that. Now, universities get income support, revenue support through the guarantee of places, which we've continued to provide regardless of whether those domestic places are filled. Certainly they have their challenges with the international market, and we'll be doing what we can to try and restore that. But universities are just not getting a special deal, Leigh.
The arts, if we can take the arts, film, TV, books, music, that has really sustained people a lot during the lockdown. That sector contributes billions to the Australian economy, and they employ 600,000 people, fewer than half of whom are eligible for JobKeeper. Again, why are their jobs valued less?
Well, that's not true.
Well, it is if you are somebody who works in the arts, because of the nature of your job. The nature of your job in the arts usually means you don't have one employer.
The eligibility that sits there for JobKeeper and the companies that are involved in the entertainment sector means that those employers have been, and the number of employees and employers who've worked in the arts sector so JobKeeper has been an absolute lifeline to them.
But that's just the thing. A lot of people in the arts sector don't work for companies. They're freelancers.
Yeah, and that's why JobSeeker is there also to support them, as it has. See, I see JobSeeker and JobKeeper working together, but recognising the significant impact in the entertainment sector. That's why we put the $250 million support package in. That's where we put the $400 million support for films. I was just announcing that just on the weekend. We understand that there are sectors that are being hit harder than others. So whether it's in entertainment or in film, just yesterday I was meeting with those in the business events sector who have also been hit hard. And so the aviation sector is another one. All areas where we've provided additional supports because of the structural nature of the problems that they face.
Even your political opponents accept that JobKeeper has been a crucial lifeline for the economy, so take that as a given. But there have been flaws, notably the waste in the overpayment of part-time workers and that $60 billion accounting error. If Labor in power had made those errors, the coalition would be screaming absolutely blue murder about economic mismanagement.
Well, not interested in the politics, Leigh, but let me address the point you made about the payments that were made to people who are part-time and who are long-term casuals. Now, we had to move these payments quickly, and we deliberately put in place a payment that was flat across all employees. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to direct payments to people on lower hours, and we would have had to exclude them, and we didn't want to do that. But the other point is it ignores the fact, and this was in the JobKeeper review, that 39% of those jobs lost were for people who had second jobs and third jobs. So they'd lost those jobs. They weren't getting JobKeeper payments for those jobs. So we made sure JobKeeper was just paid through one employer, and that made up for the income that they might have got from other jobs. So it would be wrong, I think, to make that analysis, and that analysis which Labor have made, I think, betrays a lack of understanding about the challenge at the time and the way that people work.
Given the state of the economy and given that interest rates will be functionally zero for the indefinite future, do you accept that there is no urgency to pay down debt or return the budget to surplus by slashing government spending, that it would in fact be detrimental to the economy?
Well, you've always got to be careful with government expenditure, and you've always got to spend it wisely. It's certainly not an invitation for inefficiency. It's certainly not an invitation to treat taxpayers' money carelessly.
No, but the point... Sorry to interrupt,
things.
Prime Minister, but the point I'm trying to get to is that we're not going to see next year you saying, right, we're slashing government spending so we can get debt paid down in a rapid fashion.
Well, I made this very clear several weeks ago, months ago, in fact. I said we have a number of goals here. And that is to provide the economic support that is necessary to ensure the Australian economy can emerge out of this COVID-19 recession, that we guarantee the essential services that Australians rely on. We made committed to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, our record aged care funding, our record schools funding, our record hospitals funding.
So does that mean you will be keeping government spending high and not looking for areas to slash government spending in the short to medium term?
We'll be keeping our commitments, Leigh. That's what we'll be doing. And we've made those commitments budget after budget.
But what I'm getting to, Prime Minister, sorry to keep interrupting, I'm just trying to get to a first principles issue here, which is, do you accept that the state of the economy at the moment is going to require debt for a long time and government spending to remain high to prop it up?
Well, it requires the Australian government to provide the supports that are necessary. And that's what we're doing. We've provided temporary income supports. We've provided one-off payments to those on welfare benefits to stimulate the economy. We're providing underwriting support for people to get their products into market by underwriting air freight. We're providing incentives and loans and grants and tax arrangements for businesses to invest. We're supporting concessional loans, both through the banking system and directly. And we haven't forgotten about those who are affected by drought, and we haven't forgotten about those who are affected by bushfires. We continue to roll those commitments out at record levels as well. So, Leigh, we will continue to do what Australians are asking of us, and I think one of the things we've done as a government is we've been responding to that, and we've done it with a lot of discipline, respecting taxpayers' dollars, but with a lot of compassion to ensure that the needs are met.
If we can turn to the health side of the pandemic, the public keeps being told that we have to learn to live with COVID. When authorities say that, is the logical conclusion that you're saying that we have to be prepared to live with a particular number of cases and therefore a number of deaths?
No, I don't think that's what it means. And we've been pursuing a suppression strategy, some would say a very aggressive suppression strategy, and in 7 states and territories, and not that long ago in Victoria, that had proved to be very successful. But in a world where the pandemic is running rife, then you cannot assume that in all cases that you're going to be able to prevent cases appearing.
So what's living with COVID going to look like?
Is a good example of that.
What's living with COVID going to look like?
It means keeping the discipline. It means keeping the discipline, keeping the distancing, keeping your registration on the COVIDSafe app. It means working through all of the disciplines that are necessary. It means keeping your health systems supports in place. It means maintaining your contact tracing capabilities, maintaining the testing regime. It will mean, for some period of time, certainly in Victoria, and potentially in other states where there are outbreaks, the wearing of masks. It means that it hasn't gone anywhere. And we can't live like it has. With
this aggressive suppression strategy, doesn't Victoria illustrate the real difficulty with that is that you are relying on infallible competence from leaders at every level, and you're relying on every individual doing the right thing all the time, and that's impossible to achieve?
Well, what's the alternative, Leigh? I mean, what we're doing is we're in uncharted waters. The whole world is. I mean, everyone is working together and learning together. Where there are mistakes that have been made, I think people have learned from that. I mean, what we've learned from things like Newmarch, for example, as we're dealing with the aged care challenges in Victoria at the moment, that's been very instructive. It's been very helpful. A key part of that is not just the health response in those aged care situations, but also the communications with families, critically important. I mean, Leigh, all leaders, all governments are seeking to work together, learn from each other and deal with what is a rapidly changing situation. And I think everyone's endeavouring to put their best foot forward, and that's what living with this is like. And Australia, I must stress, both economically and on the health front, is doing better than almost any other developed country in the world.
The New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian's adamant at the moment that her state won't lock down. She says you can't keep opening and shutting it all the time. So if Sydney reported 376 cases in a single day like Melbourne did today, it wouldn't be in mass lockdown?
Well, you're making a number of assumptions there. I mean, you don't get to 376 overnight, and this is where I think the New South Wales government have moved incredibly quickly. They have the largest industrial scale tracing system in the country, and they were able to move very quickly on that Crossroads outbreak and to be able to track that through incredibly fast. And even in the cases they announced over the course of today, they all had known sources. And so this is what I mean, Leigh, about living with it. You've got to keep those tracing and public health response capabilities dealing with outbreaks up to match standard all the time.
In the case,
I mean, what happened in Victoria is we had an outbreak from quarantine, and that riddled through sections of the Melbourne community, and it has now escalated to where it is today.
Well, on that point,
Commodore Hill is on the ground. The ADF support is in there.
On that point, Prime Minister, can I ask, did Victoria do anything differently to the other states when it came to following the advice of the National Cabinet on how to run quarantine?
Well, all states and territories were running quarantine. And they were responsible, each and every state, for running their quarantine. And there was clearly breaches in the Victorian quarantine.
The
Victorian government has acknowledged that.
Sorry, Prime Minister, what I'm keen to know is, was the Victorian Premier, Daniel Andrews, advised at the National Cabinet to use police and military to run quarantine in Victoria, and was that advice rejected?
Well, certainly military were always available to all the states to run those services.
Was it the recommendation?
They were using police. In Victoria, no, well, we don't seek to micromanage how the states run their states, Leigh. I mean, this is a federation, and the federation works best where there's a respect for states to run their own shows in their own jurisdiction. And I got to tell you, the states are very protective of their own jurisdictions and being in charge of the decisions made in their own state. Now, of course, that means they're accountable for those things, and I believe they are, and they will take accountability for the decisions that they've made. Victoria had made some different decisions to New South Wales.
You've previously said that the COVID app was the ticket to a COVIDSafe Australia. Today, no state or territory could point 7:30 to an instance where the app had located a close contact not already identified by manual traces. Is it time to bin that app and go for something more effective?
No, that would be ridiculous. That would be dangerous.
Well, I just told you no state can point to where it's helped.
No, but what it does is it works with the manual tracing. The two go together. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of cases that have been identified that have also been identified by the manual tracing. Now, in many parts of what we saw in Victoria, that app wasn't downloaded amongst many parts of that community. We're about at 40% downloads across the potential population who can download that app. Now, that means there's 60% of the population who hasn't. But at 40%, that's one of the highest rates for an app of that sort in the world. And so it is an important safeguard, it is an important assistance, and it is available. Now, in many other states and territories, they haven't had any cases for community transmission where it could have provided any role, because you're able to track the source to a quarantine case or something of that nature. So I found that the COVIDSafe sledges that have been coming just a little bit politically opportunistic.
Have you worn a mask anywhere yet?
Oh, I went to see an optometrist, and I wore it for the consultation.
And if you went to, say, see the Sharks play again, would you wear a mask now, given what's happening?
Well, that would all depend. I mean, the recommendation in New South Wales is if you are unable to have social distancing in place, then you should. And if that were the case, then I would.
Just Just briefly on another matter, Australia's relationship with China. When did you last speak to President Xi Jinping?
That would have been at the G20.
Does Australia's new defence strategy, along with your recent language about China, the tearing up of the extradition treaty with Hong Kong, signal a shift in thinking towards China that we now clearly view it as a potential threat and as untrustworthy?
No, it signals that Australian government will always be consistent with its values and its interests, and that's what we've always done, and we have taken no steps to seek to injure that relationship at all. In fact, our trade volumes are up, particularly in the resources sector at present. And so we will always just be consistently, and that's all we've done. And we'll continue to do that.
Would the world...
The relationship is important, and we have no intention of injuring it, but nor do we intend to do things that are contrary to our interests.
Would the world and the US be better off if Donald Trump lost the US presidential election?
It's a matter for the American people. I think it would be highly presumptuous for an Australian Prime Minister to be engaged in that level of political commentary. It's a bit of a strange question.
Prime Minister, thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot, Leigh.
Hi, I'm Leigh Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.